So I've done some creative building, as you can tell, and I discovered quite a few little tips and tricks to building a house like this that I thought I would share in a video. So I thought I would just go through and show you the step-by-step process of how I made this. You can follow along as you like, but most importantly, hopefully you learn a thing or two to apply it into your own build. So building a house like this is actually a lot simpler than it looks. All you have to do is start with a basic cobblestone wall. You can mix this up, you can blend it with other textures if you like. Throw in some smooth stone and do that kind of thing to get it all fancy, but for the sake of this video, we will just stick with flat textures. And what you want to do is, for every layer of your house, you're going to want to extrude your walls by 1. This is a very simple trick that is kind of ubiquitous with voxel building in games like Minecraft. It adds depth. As you can see, a shadow is cast along the wall below, and it makes everything look nice, right? So for every floor that we do this, we're going to want to take our wall 1 block out as we go up. And another thing to note is it's a good rule of thumb to work in sets of odd numbers. So for example, this is a set of 5. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The reason for that is as I go to make the top layer of this, when I go to make a roof, it makes a perfect peak, right? If I were to do an even thing, sure, you can maybe put stairs on either side of this and get a little fancy to break the rules, but using odd numbers kind of causes a chain effect throughout your entire build to make things kind of fit, right? Now for the fun part, this is actually quite simple. So we take our chisel and we select the 8x8 option right here. And what you do is you go along the sides. Let me get these leaves out of the way. You go along the sides of your block and just break it apart. Break off half of the block, almost like a vertical slab, but it's a lot easier to work with than vertical slabs, I've found. You're not constrained to a block size. You can change and manipulate this however you want. So now that we've taken the inside section of that off, we just do the same thing. Wait, do I have this right? Those principles apply, but I realized I did it wrong, and this is actually much simpler. So you can actually take a simple wall like this with our little extruding roof layer, obviously. But this is very simple kind of box shape, you know? When you build normally, you would use logs and you would kind of, you know, add beams to that, make it look nice, what have you. But by the power of chisels, we can actually make this even nicer. So, as I said before, you're just going to come through here and you're going to chop off the 8x8 section of the chisel menu, which basically breaks the block up into quarters. And it makes it very easy to just very rapidly go through and clean this up. Right? You just right click to select the block. Left click to chop it away. Very simple. The chiseling here is a lot easier because the second layer that you do this, you don't actually have to chisel. You can just use whole blocks. So that'll make things a little easier on you. And then the top layer, we're going to do the same thing here, right? Preferably without breaking your blocks. Just like that. And now, as you can see, it is a much, well, you can't see through these leaves. You can see it is a much more gradual, sort of fine swoop. A fine level of depth across your whole face of the wall. A nice halfway point between, you know, the quintessential Minecraft, like... In Minecraft, a lot of times you'll do extrusions like that with whole blocks because there's no vertical slabs. Or at least there weren't until they added those shelf things. But in Vintage Store, the power of chiseling makes things much, much easier. And as you saw, it's actually fairly easy to chisel this. You don't have to go in and get all fancy with the one block chisel. You can, and if you want to, it turns out nice. And I'll actually have a tip for that, which I'll show later when I do this wall. But we're pretty much good on that. And now it is time for the detailing. So, how I like to do these is you take your beams and you apply them to the corner of every wall, right? This is fairly standard in vintage story builds. But then every 2 blocks is when you put the next beam from each corner of the side. And what that allows is you can punch that out to make a window. And now it's relatively evenly balanced. You're not over cluttering with, wood beams on everything. It's just nice and organized. So the next level is just as simple. All you do, you come across to cover up the bottom here. And what you'll do to connect these is make little kind of 45-degree beams underneath the extrusion to give you that beam effect, right? And a little cheat code about this is by putting the beam across the top or the bottom layer of the next layer up, you actually cover up this little seam here. So you don't have to put a beam on, every sort of face, along the bottom and along underneath. Like a lot of the times when you go overboard on the beam work, it can look a bit too cluttered. It seems I have once again failed. Okay, so something I missed. Kind of jumping around all over the place with this, but something else to note when you're chiseling out the bottom wall here is for the corners, you want to take out all 3/4 or whatever fraction that is of the block, right? So on corners it would be equally chiseled because all around the sort of stone or bottom layer, whatever block you choose to do this with, you're cutting out the underneath. So it actually ends up being a little slightly off on that side, right? So coming back here, we throw our little beams down. There we go. That looks a lot less cluttered, or a lot less open space than it was before. And it's very simple. You just come through, throw your beams here, right? And what you want to do is around the corners, all you have to do is just repeat the same thing at a 90-degree angle. A lot of these things and techniques that you'll see are very patternable. They can be carried across, any face, any surface. A good way of thinking about building is like a system. A lot of games have very established systems like Minecraft. But this is, and to be fair, a lot of people develop their own style of building, but this is what I've found. So the next layer is much simpler. You don't actually have to chisel anything. At least on the sides, I don't think. That's something you'll find very annoying when you're working with these support beams, are the junctions that control whether or not the block is actually placed and where it's rooted are very finicky and very kind of annoying to work with sometimes. And in that case, I barely moved my mouse and it put the beam slightly off. So don't be afraid, or don't feel bad if you're not getting it right the first time, or if it takes try after try. Look at this, it just keeps going. You kind of have to be persistent with it, and eventually... Oh my god. Yes, no. This is the life of a timber worker in Vintage Story. And now it went inwards. Sweet. They're very, very finicky. Oh my god, why will this not please? What the hell? Come on. It worked once before. Am I at a weird angle? What's going on here? What the fuck? Okay, we're just gonna cover that up. A lot of the times, little mistakes like that you can leave in, because when you actually step far away, you barely even notice it's there. But if you want it to look pristine like I made it over there, you're gonna have to do that over and over until you get it right. It's very frustrating. For this second floor, it's much simpler. You're just gonna repeat that beam, vertical beam pattern on every block, right? What you're trying to do here is you're trying to balance the details, you know, so you have some space along the bottom floor, especially where this cobblestone texture is pretty noisy, right? When you get up to the upper floors, you want things to be very structured and very cluttered, because obviously there's not a lot going on up there, you know? A lot of builds can be very easily fixed by breaking up a flat wall texture with something a little more interesting. It can be support beams, it can also be logs. If I have you see this a lot in builds, where you take logs and you alternate them, and you make like a beam texture that way. This is how you typically build in like Minecraft and stuff, right? You make patterns with the whole blocks. This can be replicated, but the nice thing about Vintage Story is that patterns like that can be applied at very small scales using the chisel and beam method. It is delightful. It can seem daunting at first when you're first, you know, picking it up and you don't really know what to do. At least I know that's how I was when I first saw chiseling. But really, once you just dive in and embrace the madness, it actually becomes quite fun. So, for up here, obviously I'm just replicating that, but what I like to do is alternate between these whole pattern here on the wall. And I like to add these little X things. The joint placement, especially when you start placing this many beams, gets very awkward. A lot of the times you'll misplace a beam and then you'll have to break the block to get rid of it. And if you're in creative and you pick the block to, you know, replace it, it will oftentimes, let's see if it, yeah, there it is. Oftentimes it'll just inherit the beams. It's pretty annoying, but I understand why they coded it that way. So a good little tip for beamwork like this, when you're getting very meticulous with it, is to place your joints at a place where there isn't an existing joint. So like right here, you see these little boxes? Those are what you break in order to break the beam. So you go to a corner that doesn't have those, and you can place it very easily. Now when you're going into a normal box, you kind of just have to sit there and play with it, but as you can see right here, I got it. And now it makes that nice little X pattern. The technique that I've discovered for doing that, if you have to, obviously in some cases, like that beam right there, it just placed naturally. You know, you kind of have to sit there and lock pick this system to get it to do what you want. But when you end up in a situation like this, where you have these big joints, try and take the beam a little underneath, right? So you would normally try and place it like right on top, and then it starts placing it under there. But if you get a little down and kind of aim center of the block towards the bottom, I don't know why, but you can actually get underneath that joint to place it where you want it, and you end up with those very nice patterns. Now for these layers, you can add glass to these windows and just kind of put a glass block there if you like. But I like to do things a little more historically accurate, and for a lot of the medieval period, even people who could afford houses like this could not afford glass. Glass was a very difficult commodity to make, and it was primarily reserved for, you know, churches and large buildings of state and whatnot. People who could afford that. So I like to make these little hole windows that I referenced. If I remember correctly, it's actually fairly simple. So you use the 8x8, just like you did on the the bottom wall there. And you just cut out the upper and lower layers of the block there. And then you come back through with your chisel and you select the 4x4 option. And what you can do with chiseling that I actually don't see a lot of people do is there's this little option here where you can drop blocks to add a material. So what you can do is you can select different block types to then place at these layers. And you just come through and you place a 4x4 chiseled... Oops. Yeah, you have to do it per block, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. It's part of the madness. You just come through and place a 4x4 sort of, what is that, a quarter slab on either side, and it makes that nice little gap that just gives a very, very nice window effect. A quick aside for these lower windows on the lower levels, where it is a whole block and it's sort of framed by these beams instead of using a chiseled effect like that. That works best when you're working with whole blocks. Obviously you could do it at other blocks, but for the sake of simplicity, that's how I like to do it. But for these windows down here, what you can actually do is, let's see if I can get this. Might have to, let's see. Yeah, so when you're making these little trapdoor windows like this is actually something that I read was very historical in the 12th and 13th century. They would have these windows that you would drop down to sell your wares to other people in the street, obviously in like a city or a town or something like that. They had these vertical trapdoors, and they look very nice, right? When they're closed, you can close them so drifters and stuff can't get through, you can't get shot by boat horns. But when you open them, make this nice little platform that looks very nice. And how you achieve that with this is you place the trapdoor somewhere. I think you have to break, it's before you place the beams. There we go. I kind of glossed over this step earlier. But what you want to do is place the trapdoor before you place those beams. I don't want, oh, it's the top one, I knew it. There we go. It's always the top one. The bottom one doesn't usually cause issues because it's on the outer face of this block, but the top one, if you place it like here or here, a lot of the times it will block the hitbox of the trapdoor. So what you can do is, there it is, you can place your trapdoor in there. Now that that little top beam is out of the way, and this will open to give you that nice countertop. What you want to do is, obviously you can't place beams. Oh, hello. I guess you can place beams there. Yeah, see, it says cannot place here, block is in the way. So what you want to do is just come right in front of it. Very carefully. Actually, there it is. Yeah, so you want to place on the upper corner of the block next to it, right? So in this upper corner, go here and you place on the other side the upper corner. And that places your little frame there, and looks like I missed the beam on that vertical one, but that makes a nice little window that can be quite nice. And that's how you avoid the hitboxes, so that you can add the trapdoors there. So now that the second floor is done and you pattern it with whatever you like, you can add X's. A lot of the times you can add just single diagonal beams across the 2-block height. That can make things look nice. You can also go across and do a 1-block beam pattern across whatever to make it a lot more intricate. I know in the Tudor styles, they get very fancy with it. But for the upper floors, you just repeat the very same thing. And you're going to want at every one of these beam corners or joists or whatever they're called, you're going to want to put those 45 degree, I don't even know if it's 45 degrees, but you're going to want to put these little diagonal thingies. Just like that. Do that all around the build at every little intersection where one would go. Just wherever these beams line up and where they match up, you want to put one so that it's a little believable that the beams are actually supporting those upper weights. And now you can see we're starting to get that very, very nice, complicated. It seems complicated when you first look at it, but it's actually quite simple when you learn the system of how it's done. And obviously, don't need to do that upper seam. You can if you're walking up close and you want that to be a little more clean like that. You can do that, obviously. I typically don't, or I haven't in the time that I've spent making these. But I think a lot of times if you add too many beams, things can get very, very cluttered very, very quick. So you wanna place things in meaningful spots that create a system of patterns to make something a little more complicated, like this. Upper floors, these roof portions, obviously this is for like an A roof. It would be a little different if you had something like this or something like this. This would actually be quite simple because you just do it all along that pattern. But what I really want you to take away from this video is that these patterns can be adapted to really any shape of building. Probably the biggest, I guess, turn off to building is that it takes a lot of iteration. So as you build, you notice things and you change them to adapt to whatever shape or design that you're working on. It takes a lot of time, a lot of practice, but hopefully you can learn a little bit of how to do that here. Top floor, super simple. You just do a simple, oops. Where's that? Yeah, sometimes the little joints just don't show up. It's very odd. A lot of the times I've had it where when you place a joint or place a beam, the joint little hitbox here will inherit a beam like over here. And so you'll have to break this one to break that one. It gets very, very buggy. A good rule of thumb though is that you can just break the block, there we go, the block that it's placed on to just get rid of it and restart. I don't know how that works in survival because I haven't done it yet, but hopefully it's not as painstaking. Top layer is very simple. You just repeat that pattern all the way up. Very nice, just like that. I don't typically put the little X patterns on the upper roof because you're gonna want to put these diagonal beams here, like that. And then I like to break it up with something like that at the top. Not typically to just kind of go overboard like that because I can get a little bit crazy for my taste. Not that this isn't crazy as it is. Point being, that is how you do this half timbering style for medieval style builds. The roof I can go over real quick. It's a little more complicated just because this is the way that I've found to do it. Like that suits my style of building. A lot of people do a lot of different kinds of roofs, but this is the one that I have done. Inspired, obviously, by, there's another builder, Nelizin, I believe it's pronounced. It's another YouTuber who made a good tutorial on how to do these shapes here. And so what these are they're actually regular wattle and daub. Actually, I believe, yeah, this used to be a red ceramic shingle block, which, so it starts out like this, and then this is where chiseling gets a little crazy. But how I did it, and to keep it super simple, is I worked in the 4x4 selection area. Some people I've seen will do the single pixel chiseling all the way down, which can look nice, and a lot of the times they can cover it up for very clean seams, right? This is obviously a little messy looking, but in my experience, when you have, you know, a building this complicated, and you're standing far back, like a lot of times you're not gonna be like walking up to a house and looking directly at those seams, right? So as you step out and look away at what you've built, a lot of those little imperfections just kind of, your brain tunes them out as it looks at the bigger picture, right? At least it does for me. And so what I like to do, as you saw with these lower layers, when I took the 8x8 and I just cut the block off, is I like to work in the larger block chopping chisel methods, right? So this is just 4x4 cut away, and then I use the light brown wattle and daub, right? So you take the chisel, select the block, and then, yeah, and then I just went through here and made a little face, right? Just a nice clean area that basically blends the two blocks together, right? This is a lot trickier to do, obviously, but the one piece of advice I would give for doing this, I don't know why there's a beam being placed when I'm holding a red shingle block. Hello? What is this? Hello? Okay, I'm gonna try that. There we go. Yeah, the beams, the support beams are a little wonky sometimes. But the best way I've found to do this, I obviously don't know how it's done in survival with like cloning blocks and doing all that. I find it's simplest to just do it as if you were building it with normal blocks, right? Do it one block at a time. Chisel this out, and just where it is on your build, right? When it's, I believe, yeah, this is just a red ceramic shingle block on top of light and brown wattle daub, right? So when you actually look at it in its base component, it's very simple when you place the original blocks. If I were to build this house, or this wall section, obviously you have to repeat it around to turn it into a house. That's what it would look like, right? That's fairly decent for, I guess, a Minecraft alpha build. But Vintage Story can let you take that and transform it into something a lot nicer looking, right? I think I messed up the beams here, so it looks a little wonky. These were also copied over from that wall, so it's not exactly. But yeah, so how I recommend doing this is to just place the whole blocks as you would like this, and then just come through with your chisel in the 8x8 mode, and you just go through and you chisel through all the blocks, just like that, right? So when you're doing the roofs, I would recommend just leaving the block where it is, just where you want it in the actual build, right? And then just coming through and doing the chiseling by hand. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass compared to, you know, having like a pre-made thing that you would copy across different things. Obviously you can. For survival, I would imagine you would want to. But in my experience, when it comes to building something like this, a lot of the times when you just work with it, almost like a single block of stone, right? You're sculpting something. It's easier just to place it down and then go through and chisel everything, right? At least to me, it would be. I fully intend to build these on my survival server, but it's currently down, so that is part of why I have not posted in a very long time. Yeah, so I messed up the beam over here. You want to place it on the corner block. Yeah, so for these ones, you almost want to place them not exactly on the corner, but a little to the left, just so that it puts that seam at the same level as the roof, right? And this looks a little wonky, this little section here, because I think, yeah, this roof is technically a little bit different of a shape. So instead of something like this, what it was you would go up 2. To make something like that. I think I messed that up when I originally showed this. Why does this look off? Huh. Oh. I see it now. Not me completely fumbling. There we go. That's how you want it. Okay, so my mistake. Again, I was lost trying to explain things that I messed up. Point being, for the roofs, when you're doing this, you actually want the roof to be at ground level, right? So this roof would actually look like that in your original build, which is actually a lot simpler, right? For that roof in particular, what I did was I went up 1 block, 2 block, and then up like that. So it was 1, 1, 2, 1 is the pattern there, and then you can put the top one there and chisel it. Roofs get very finagly. But the nice thing about this style is you can then just take the regular red shingle block that you use in, you know, typical builds, and you can just place it on top. It makes a nice little roof texture. Obviously you want to come through and put your beams here, your beams across. Go ahead and tidy this up. Right. So in that case, I just raised it up by 1 block, which gives you that nice kind of swoop pattern, right? You can do any kind of roof shape that you want. The principle is the same. You just place down the blocks, and then you come in with a chisel, and you chip away at it, and then replace, once you get to this layer, and make these little blocks here, right? So for any roof shape, it's the same principle. You just place down the blocks and then go through and chisel out the corner surface to make it match the chiseled in face of the wall. Roofs are where things get a little meticulous, tedious, annoying, I would say. Just trying to figure everything out. It's still quite fun, in my opinion. Obviously, you could leave it at that. What I did for this roof here is... This is technically 2 blocks, right? So it's like this. But I took the 8x8, cut that portion out. I came back in with the 4x4, just like I was showing with the other ways of doing this, right? And I just shave off the sides. And then I believe higher up, yeah. So higher up I did do a little bit of 1 block chiseling, just because obviously you can roll with that. That looks fine. But if you want it to look even nicer, it's not even the 1x1, it's the 2x2. Come in with the 2x2, cut off a set of 4. You'll notice a lot of the times as I was building this, everything is about working in sets of numbers, right? So for this building, it is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You go 5 across, 2 up, but further out, and then the 1 tip. Technically, it's 3 up because of the central thing. That is kind of the secret sauce to making very fancy builds, is to find the system of sets of numbers and using patterns and principles to take something like this and turn it into this. I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe. I'll probably make more of these videos as I experiment more with vintage story building. So stay tuned for that if you want to learn more little discoveries that I come across in my building misadventures, and hopefully you can take these and apply them to your own world. Doesn't have to be one for one, right? A lot of times you can just take the principle, adapt it to however you like, however it fits in your style of building, and just come up with something. Iterate. The point of building and creativity and stuff like this is that you just kind of play with it. It's like Play-Doh. You just sit there and let your mind turn and spitball whatever you can think of, and that's how something like this comes about. So hopefully my ramblings weren't too convoluted for you to understand, and I'll see you guys next time. Naturally, as is tradition with this video, I forgot something, so I'm just gonna insert a little fucking Avengers Endgame post-credits scene here. So something else to notice about these builds, super easy way to make your specifically cobblestone or stone chiseling, stone brickwork chiseling a little nicer. Just come through and add these little 2 wide, it's just little 1x2 single pixel bricks, right? It's a little hard to see because the shadow's on this side. Here we go. You see these little extrusions here? It's a little more evident on this house as you look at it. You can see right there. There are the little single block extrusions. I like to put those all around the flat wall texture where I cut away those 8x8 segments. Adds a little bit of extra flavor to the build, I think. And then I didn't cover how to make doorways and story stuff like that. There's not really a rhyme or reason or a method to making more complicated chiseled stuff like that. I could go into it and give you a little tutorial on how I kind of brainstorm that stuff. But I figured if I went into that kind of thing and did the whole entire house, this would be a like 4-hour long video. It's already going to be like a 20, 30, maybe even 40-minute video. So I kind of wanted to just cover the basics of how to do the actual like exterior work. Yeah, I'll give you a little close-up shot. You can see a little bit of how the spaghetti sauce is made. If you want another tutorial about how to do these and how to do a little more complicated chiseling stuff, I'm not that experienced with it, but this looks pretty nice, so I could teach you that. And then obviously I didn't even go through the interior. There's a lot more to it. But I'll kind of speed run some of the basic principles for the interior because this is kind of a whole medieval house video, and I didn't really show the rest of the actual house because it took so long just to show you the initial walls out there. I'm just gonna speed quick notes these Avengers Endgame style, hint at the cinematic vintage story Red Wing universe. You just beams on the sides of windows, ends of corners, inside of walls, set of 2 beams across here. You can obviously just look at these and study for yourself how to do it. The stairs were a little wonky. I just again cut out in sections of 8x8 and 4x4 to create this basic pattern that can be walked up and down, and then line it with beams so it looks a little nice. Very simple. This is a very important feature that I forgot to mention because I didn't do interiors because this video is long enough, but this is a 1 or 2 pixel wide chiseled floor. This I actually am very proud of because what it does is it lets you put a face, a floor, right, on different levels, but it gives you a lot more space for visual appeal with much smaller houses. Like if you look, this cobblestone layer, which is technically like the room, right? If these were whole blocks, it would just be a 2-high room. but by chiseling away that bottom, like pretty much the entire block except the floor there, you can get a whole room at very small scale. That's what I love about vintage stories. You can pack so much detail and so much more dynamic effects in smaller spaces because of chiseling. It's quite beautiful. Attic is, or the second floor is nothing special. I barely even worked on this. Out here, little shed. Again, simple principles of, and it's kind of the same with that. You just take the wooden beams, make a vertical line every block, put a horizontal line on the seams, chisel out a little under thing on the windows. It's a little trickier with thatch. You kind of just can't do it because these blocks can't be chiseled. So it's a little tricky. And yeah, hopefully that covers everything. Sorry to kind of bottom load so much information about the build in the very end of it when maybe I should have considered that in the first place, but I was not expecting this to take so long. So hopefully this is helpful. May you find much inspiration and make cool builds in Vintage Story. Thanks. Bye.